John here from Ripewave Audio, back with the Anthem AVM 78K, and this is the second in our series to do this evaluation over a month period to determine its features, its capabilities, and ultimately its sound quality compared to our Marantz Cinema 50 and our Emotiva RMC-1, which we have as part of our home theater system here at Ripewave Audio. This is a 9.2.6 capable AV processor. And with this, it means you get front wide speakers and up to 3 rows of height channels and 2 subwoofer for that layout. And these can all run simultaneously. That's 17 channels of processing. Now our Emotiva RMC-1 is 16 channels of processing, so that one less channel doesn't allow you to do that full 9.2.6 simultaneously, but this one does. If you haven't watched our prior video, we'll put a link in the description so you can go back and see those details covered on that first video. Now there are some things that have changed with the upgrade that was performed in that first video. One is the way that the height channels are handled. When we got this unit, fresh out of the box, brand new unit, it had fairly old firmware. It was over a year old. And it wouldn't allow me to configure the second row of heights as the height 2s. I had to move them to height 3s. Now when I upgraded to the latest version, that kind of reversed itself. I could no longer configure my second row of heights as height 3s. I had to configure them as height 2s. Not a big deal. I just moved the XLR balance connections over to height 2s and I was all set. And then of course I changed the configuration in the menus. This became particularly problematic when I went to run Anthem ARC. Now with that old firmware, that second row of heights were working just fine. So they made a change there. And some of you commented like that, how are you getting that configuration? Because it was old firmware. Now with the latest firmware, we have it working probably like the rest of you are experiencing if you have this model. In this video, we're going to talk about how quickly this can switch HDMI signals in comparison with our Cinema 50 from Marantz and the RMC-1 from Emotiva. Then we're going to take a look at Anthem ARC Genesis, the Anthem Room Correction, Genesis being its latest incarnation, and give you some feedback on how well that went and why I am sitting with my center channel torn apart behind me and a broken driver. More on that later. Then we're going to talk about the alternate interfaces to the front panel display. You can do a lot of the configuration all from this front panel using the wheels and the buttons, but they also have a web page and a mobile app, and we'll talk about those. And then we're going to get into how we're using the presets, and as we found this is to be a very helpful tool, and then ultimately the sound quality, because after all the features and everything, if it doesn't sound good, it isn't going to matter. So we're going to talk about the sound quality as a conclusion for this Anthem AVM 78K. So let's start in first with the HDMI switching. And we're going to set up here on the video where we're going to start. I'm going to record all these, and then through post-editing, I'm going to run them simultaneously, and you can see which one switches the quickest. And so for the setup, what we've got is, and we've done another video just recently where we were getting an HDMI splitter. And this is so I can take one Apple TV 4K and split it out to these 3 units. I have the capability of doing 4 with this. This is a 4-channel splitter. I got 2 of them. So not only could I have input 1 with the Apple TV using splitter 1, but I can have my Sony ultra high definition Blu-ray player using another one, splitting off 4 times to each of these to be able to send signal to each of these 3 receivers and processors, whatever I have in test at the time. And then with both getting the same signal with the same set of cables, with cables I bought all at the same time from the same make and model. And then we're going to do a comparison, and you can see which unit switches the quickest. We'll go back and forth a couple of times. And just prior to executing this test, I do want to talk about another thing that seemed to improve once I did the firmware update, and that was the input switching. Now, if you watched the last video, you can hear my complaint about having to push 3 buttons to switch the inputs. And now with this firmware update, it's a little better, but I still, of course, don't have direct access buttons to input 1, input 2, input 3, etc. I can hit the input button and then move, but I don't even need to hit the input button. I can just hit the left and right arrows on the remote to cycle through everything. And ultimately, when I hit the input I want, hit the select button, and away we go. So let's do the speed test with HDMI switching. HDMI 1 to HDMI 2, HDMI 2 now. HDMI 1 now. HDMI back to HDMI 2 now. I'll get the actual timing when I do the post-production, when I line up the frames and actually count this out, but I believe that the Anthem was the quickest to switch, followed by the Marantz, then Emotiva. Now, Emotiva, the RMC-1, is the only one that isn't HDMI 2.1. Now, I'm not sure if that fully has to do with it, but it might, right? So just keep that in mind. That's the HDMI switching capabilities of the AVM 70 8K. While it's not blazing speed, it's not like on my dad's Marantz 2275 where it was a mechanical switch and it was instantaneous. There is still some latency there, but it's a little faster than others that are out there. Now let's talk about Anthem ARC and why I have a broken driver. So ARC Genesis, now with the Genesis version, it only runs on Mac or PC. It is not a mobile version, but if you have a laptop, you essentially have a mobile version, but you can't use a tablet to run ARC Genesis at the moment. The issue I had, I'm not sure everybody will experience. I've got some support calls into Anthem to help me sort this out. I'm waiting to hear back on this to see if we can get to a better solution. But when I run the ARC Genesis and we get the sweep tones, they're extremely loud. I measured this with an SPL meter at C weighting, and it came in over 90 decibels. And it's too much for my ears. I have to cover my ears when I ran it. And I got through all of it. But I said, there's got to be a way to lower the test tone. It doesn't need to be that loud. It shouldn't need to be that loud. Most of what I'm experiencing, whether it was the Marantz Cinema 50, either it was with the Odyssey or the DIRAC upgrade, and then the Emotiva with its DIRAC, 75 dBs, I mean, that's all it, I mean, it was all tolerable. Nothing was this loud. Anthem said, well, you can lower this down through some of the menu pages. It didn't seem to have any effect, because what happens is when you go and connect with Anthem Arc, which comes, by the way, free with each unit you buy, which is a good thing. It locks the volume. If you turn the volume wheel, it has no effect. I tried in the calibration levels on the menu pages to lower those down, no effect. Ultimately, I did find a way by using the web page to lower it down. Whether it was in Anthem Arc or the quick measure tool. Now, Anthem did say go into the quick measure tool, but I can't seem to adjust the levels within the quick measure tools. Yes, you can use that quick measure tool to get your subwoofer levels, because my subwoofers have its own volume control, and I can raise and lower that at the subwoofer. But I can't seem to adjust the levels from the quick measure tool. But what I could do is go into the web page for this unit and go and change the master volume there, the main volume, and that worked. The individual speaker levels had no effect on the output for the measurements. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not sure if others are. If you're experiencing the same problem, let me know. If it's just if it's working well for you, also let me know. And let me know how you're doing it, because this doesn't sound right that I can't lower the volumes. I'm used to DIRAC and an Odyssey where I can first. I mean, DIRAC is. I like how you do set the levels with DIRAC at first. You do it 20 dBs over the noise floor. They have you set that for each speaker, and it's all good. This seems to want to handle everything itself, the distances, the timings, the levels. Despite this pain, I did run through it at that 90 dB, and the results were very good. So it was worth the pain for me from that perspective. When running Arc Genesis, when you put the microphone in different positions, I often just swing this boom to the different ones, so position 1, position 2, etc. But when you move it, one thing you have to pay attention to is this little sticker here that says this should be pointing to the front. So if I turn this, it's no longer pointing to the front. So I have to remember to turn that. And I kept forgetting to turn that and having to redo the measurement just to make sure that that was the case. Now, when I'm doing calibrations with DIRAC, I use my UMIC-1 microphone with that. And it's not directional. I can point this any way, so if I swing it, it doesn't matter. I can't use, it doesn't recognize, Anthem Arc Genesis does not recognize this microphone. It only recognizes the microphone that comes with the kit. So I was not able to use any other microphone but this one. One thing I had to do, because it kept on saying my subwoofer levels were too high. And these are the levels I had, about 50% on the volume, which I've used for Odyssey and DIRAC calibrations. No trouble at all. They just kind of adjusted for it. But with Anthem Arc Genesis, I had to move it down 5 clicks from that center position before Anthem Arc Genesis liked my subwoofer levels. So I did that, and all was good. But when I got through with this, I was like, I want to figure out a way to run this at reasonable levels, more at a 75 dB level. And the workaround was to use the web page where I could lower that volume down, but I had to do it just before the measurements of each microphone position. So typically with Anthem Arc Genesis, there's 5 measurement positions, the main listening seat, and then a cross diagonal 2 in front of the listener and 2 in back, so it looks like a number 5 on a dice, those positions and the way they laid out. You can go up to 10 positions, which I did try that, but it didn't seem to make that much of a difference, and that just takes those out a little further away from the main listening position, those extra measurement locations. And you can do those simultaneously. We'll do the first pass. Let's say I have it set up as 5 measurement positions on measurement set A. I can do measurement set B with 10 listening positions. I could even change the speaker counts and layouts, although I kept mine the same. I have a 7.2.4 configuration, so not fully using the capabilities of the AVM 70, which can do the front wides. Ultimately, we'll add front wides. Not sure if we're going to get to the 3rd row of heights because of some pipes in the way of my ceiling. But nevertheless, problem was, when I was using this method of the web page, the volume adjuster is very touchy. What it displays on your AVM 70, it wasn't matching what was coming out. It really takes over that volume control. So I'll do that just before the measuring. It always does the front left speaker first. And then when it moves to the second speaker, which is the center channel, it bumps up again. So I've got to go and tickle that volume up and down a little bit until it resets, and I had it back to like negative 50 dBs on the volume. And I went through this for several listening positions, and then I got to one, and my mouse slipped. I just missed that up button a little bit, and it went to maximum volume. It sent out full volume through my Emotiva XPA1 amplifier, monoblocks, at 4 ohm speakers. That's like 1,000 watts, and killed my driver. I found a part on eBay. It's coming. I'm either doing something really wrong, or I just got to put up with the 90 dBs, or I don't know. Maybe I just need to reset the firmware and start all over again and hope for the best. But I don't want to damage any more drivers in the process. So feedback from you obviously would be helpful, but that was my problem. The good news is it sounded great when I was done. Let's talk about mobile applications now. We talked about the web page. You get into the IP address from the menu here. You figure out the IP address on this. You put that into your browser, and the web page just comes up. There's no password or anything. And that works. The other thing that you've got is the mobile app. Now, when you run the mobile app, it will do a discovery first, and it will find any of the Anthem products that it supports. So the AVM 70 is listed here. I can select that, and like this volume control a lot better. I can turn ARC on and off. Once that's configured, I can mute. I can go to zone 2 settings. Can even turn the whole unit off if I wanted to. Can go into settings, and here you can adjust your bass, treble, but also all the different speaker levels granularly. This is really good. So sort of like the trim levels that I have on my Emotiva remote, but this is now on your mobile phone and effectively can do the same thing and quietly adjust if somebody wants to hear the dialogue a little bit more, or they have more bass or less bass. You can do this very discreetly with other people in the room through your handheld mobile app. So very good there. And then you can get into network settings and your inputs and define all those. So like this app, but I'm wondering why it's still in beta. And as a beta app for iPhone, at least for the iPhone, I got to install Test Flight, and there's a timeout. So I don't know what happens in 30x days when this times out, do I have to reinstall it? Do they finally have a full version of this? But this mobile app's been out for over a year. I'm just curious why it's still in beta. So at least for the iPhone, Android, I believe it's just available. So while we're here, we can talk about presets and how I use them here. And what I've done here is I've got one, you've got HDMI 1, I've got that on profile 1. Was the 5 position measurement with Arc Genesis. And then profile 2 was using 10 position Arc Genesis. So I could go between HDMI 1 with profile 1 and profile 2. And then I've got this other preset which it takes Arc off completely. So I can try 2 different measurements with Arc and 1 without, and I can toggle between the 3 of them. What I've noticed is with no Arc, the sound seems to be very bass heavy, a little on the boomy side, not as clear. With Arc Genesis turned on, things become a lot more clear to the sound, and the bass is articulate now, much more clear. Now here's my assessment on the sound quality, and I'm doing my ABC with my Duke audio switchers here. And I think it's very important to do apples to apples, right? Level match each of these to the same volume. If one's louder than the other, it may be perceived as better. The other thing is always do the same sound modes. If room correction is on one, put it on all of them, or off on all of them. Don't compare a stereo with a surround sound processing. Make sure things like loudness, and on the Anthem you've got the Dolby sound dynamics. I turn all that off. Turn loudness off on the Emotiva, the Dolby modes off, and do the comparison that way, apples to apples. And I always start off in stereo mode, and we start off with room correction off. Now with the Marantz, I've gone through the DIRAC upgrade and run the calibration through DIRAC, found it to be better than the Odyssey, at least my experience. So my comparisons would always be with DIRAC when it's turned on. But what I've found, whether it's room corrections turned on or off, Marantz I always felt sounded muffled compared to the other two. Not as clear, not as articulate. It sounded a lot closer to the Emotiva or the Anthem with DIRAC run. I felt that upgrade was worth it. We'll do another video on that. But getting into now Anthem versus Emotiva. With like processing put on, either room correction on or off. Let's just start with off. Anthem, right out of the box, if I set my distances, my levels, and all that, it sounds a little on the boomy side. It's a little bass heavy. But when I ran Anthem Arc Genesis, that bass cleared up. It became more articulate, more clear, more balanced, and it sounded great. Excellent sound quality out of this unit. Comparing it to the Emotiva is just a little livelier. Also clear, also articulate, but livelier. And I prefer that sound better. The other thing that bothers me about the sound quality, and this is maybe minor to some of you, the fan just kicked on this when we're speaking here. I'm not even running anything through it. And hearing that fan kick on and kick off bothers me. There's no fans in the Emotiva or the Marantz. So that's bothersome to me. but it's a good sounding unit. I love the flexibility you get with all the presets, and you can put 4 different things coming out of ARC in there and play around and do the A/B testing just by using the remote and cycling through those custom inputs that you set up. Wonderful. Great job there, Anthem. And you've done well where it counts. This whole business of really loud calibration, the measurements there, I'm either doing something wrong or something needs to be fixed. So we'll wait and see. I'll give a feedback if I learn something more from Anthem. But that's just kind of my conclusion with the AVM 70 8K. I imagine that the 90 is even better. Whether the 90 then outclasses the RMC-1, that would be an interesting test if we could ultimately get one of those in for testing. That would be awesome. So what are your thoughts on this unit? Particularly if you own one, was your experience any different than mine? If you think I got some points wrong, that's fine. I'm just conveying the experiences that I've had with this. It's an honest portrayal. So, but yeah, let me know if I got something wrong or if your experiences were different. That feedback would be useful to this Ripewave audio community. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And be sure to hit that bell notification so you'll be informed when the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.